Somewhere in the middle, try to find myself again. But life is one big riddle of the future and what's been. Guess it's the way it goes, and I will never know why you let me go. Look to the left, look to the right, nothing can stop me in the night, like I am leaving all the bad stuff and trying to remain so strong. I know it's good if I'm alone. I got it, I gotta go, 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 running through better times. Go, 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 from my emotions I'll go, 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 running through better times, to better times, to better times.
Good evening, everyone. We are back again for another edition of To Be Black and Female, presented to you by the Louvre Health Co., Dylan and Elle Hoffman's incredible, comprehensive digital wellness tech company. So tonight you have myself again. My name is Alexis Alston. I'm a venture capitalist in Cincinnati, Ohio, with a love of all things health tech. And we have
Samira Williams. I am your licensed psychotherapist and trauma recovery coach.
Awesome. So we have a lot of things to talk about, a lot of things maybe not to talk about. But I'd say today we'll probably cover kind of the intersection of modern politics and being a Black woman in America right now. So we can start a lot of places, for better or worse. But let's see. Let's start with a magic number. How does that feel, Samara? How about
Sure.
a number that sounds like $750?
Can I just say that most people in their 20s, like a regular kind of 10, 12 bucks an hour are paying more per year in taxes than $750. Can I just say, when I was 20 years old, I paid more than that. Certainly, now, I mean, most working American people that don't make six figures a year are paying more than that.
Yep.
Single moms,
Yep.
college students.
Everyone is. And what's interesting is I feel like there's a lot of discussion in certain Black communities about, this doesn't apply to me. This doesn't apply to me, especially lower income communities. I know a ton of people who don't do their taxes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I feel like this opened up a really important conversation about how it's kind of our civic duty to do it. And
Yeah.
I understand that as Black people, we have a very complicated relationship with feeling American,
Yeah.
whatever that may mean to us, or better or worse. But we've all got to pay our taxes and pay the right amount of taxes for your income.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. And the other thing is, we've seen with some of our most favorite celebrities as well as everyday people, you can't run from your taxes forever. And so the reality is, for people in our community and abroad, you can certainly make payment arrangements when it comes to your taxes. You can pay a monthly payment towards the balance that you owe. You can go back. I'm not a financial advisor, but these are just common things that are available in a Google search. You can go back and file past year's taxes that you haven't filed. There are ways to make it right. And we all get overwhelmed sometimes, and sometimes W-2s don't come and we forget, and we things happen. But you can right that ship. And I guess the challenge for many of us is that it's not the amount, I guess, that he has owed for 2016 and 2017, but it's also the amount of years that it seems like maybe he didn't pay any taxes based on what he was making, which is definitely in the millions per year, and there's a an air of like, is this tax evasion? And so I feel
Mhm.
like there are many things that our current president have done that don't necessarily fit the bill of legal, certainly not ethical, but even not legal. And so it seems like we have to really think about that in terms of the upcoming election. I mean, I think the reality is we have to look at how we got here. Certainly, the email investigation of Hillary Clinton didn't help the election almost 4 years ago. But I also think even when all was said and done, it was found that no criminal activity had been done. And we look at the current sitting president, and we know, we realize, we have proof of there have been things that do not seem legal that have been done on his watch. And I think we have to look at, I think as a Black community, um, this is like a job vacancy. And so the person who's currently in the job wants to keep the job. And the new person who wants the job is also applying. And I've seen a lot of influencers that I follow on social media platforms in the past election had said they don't like either candidate. Therefore, they were not going to vote at all. And many of them had, millions of followers. Many of them were Black and brown people. And so, what I, am in meditation about and prayer about, and just advocacy in my own sphere, is that we cannot choose to be like a kid who says, I don't like either toys, therefore I don't want either. This is not the same thing. It's not saying that you have to be in love or the biggest fan of either candidate. But I think clearly there's a candidate that seems more qualified and more stable to have this kind of position, and who has selected a VP that can do the job and do it well. And there is no perfection in politics, but I certainly feel like we have watched someone be in this position for almost 4 years, and the track record is proven, but he's not capable of doing the job well. And so I think we really have to have a conversation around, are we deciding as Black and brown people to put our head in the sand about this and just not do anything? I believe this could be the most important election for people, really 45 and under. I mean, it could be the most important election of this generation, in terms of, if we look at the corruption and the injustice and the chaos that's happened in these past 4 years. If someone feels like they're getting away with something, they're going to continue to do it, even um, to exponential amounts. And so I think that if we allow the tone of what's happening in this country to continue under this current regime, I believe we're going to live to regret it immensely.
I agree. I agree. And not only is it super important for everyone to vote, it's also incredibly important. And I think today is the last day. So if you haven't done it, do it now. Fill out the census.
Yeah,
There are systems in place hoping and praying that Black and brown people aren't counted. Because only when we're counted do our voices really matter. Only when we're
yeah,
counted are our districts properly and appropriately represented. Anyone who knows anything, unfortunately, about the history of the development of suburbs in America, those communities were created purposefully to shut us out. And then when they couldn't shut us out from buying property, they redrew the lines of what community or district or county meant to then continue to shut us out of the political conversation. And so,
yeah,
what you have to do is you have to be counted and you have to fill out your census. It takes 2 seconds. And I know, especially as Black people, we always say we don't want people in our business, but nobody's looking for you. Nobody's coming after you based on what you fill out in the census. Just fill it out. You can do it online really quickly. Please do it before midnight Eastern time, I believe, tonight, if you haven't done it yet. You only
yeah.
have
And
to do it one
call a
time.
friend. Yes.
Please, no one like I. That's another big part, I think, of Black political engagement is we have this massive fear or distrust of what people will do with our data and our
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
right? There's an assumption that, oh, they're going to get me for my taxes or my child support payments or, my student loans or whatever. When really, that's not the purpose of most of these important things that we have to do, like census and voting. Those are separate, although important. But really, it's important that your voice be heard and that you're counted and you use your government name to do it.
Yes, right. It is important. It's important, and I think, just like you said, we can make things more complicated than they need to be. And I think it's important for us to think about the consequences. We've talked before on this series about our grandparents realized that they were fighting for privileges and justices and rights that they may not fully see the fruit of that labor in their generation. But they did it for us, the future generation to come, and believe that we have an obligation and responsibility to do the same thing for our kids and our nieces and our nephews and our godchildren and our future generations coming behind us. We are leaving them with an absolute mess. And I think that what you're saying is so true. There are simple things that we can do to turn the tide. One is the census. It's not too late. You can do it online. It's relatively simple. The other is registering to vote and actually voting and doing what you need to do to make sure that your vote count. If you're going to be away or your address has changed or something, you can vote absentee ballot, and you can still, I believe, do that until October. October. Excuse me. We can post the information about that, but you still have a few weeks to be able to vote by absentee ballot and to get things worked out. If you need to register, that only takes a few minutes to register also and be able to vote, because there are forces at work trying to prevent certain people from being able to vote, because and it's really easy to think about this paradigm. If your vote didn't matter, there wouldn't be so much invested in making sure that your vote doesn't count, or that you can't vote, that they're closing polling places in certain neighborhoods. If your vote truly didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying so hard to get you to not vote. And so you have to think about that when you're thinking about, what can I do to affect change where I am, in my neighborhood, in my community. I also think that we have to do what we didn't do the last election and talk to family and friends. I think we have to make sure the people that we care about are also registered and have a plan to vote.
Hmm. And for all of you who have jobs that require you to physically be somewhere, healthcare workers, military, firefighters, and you can't get the day off to go vote, let's deal with this now ahead of time. Vote, do a mail-in ballot,
Yeah.
please,
Yeah.
because especially in our community, a lot of us have jobs where we can't just pop out for 3 hours to stand in line to
Yeah.
go vote at a polling place.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, but it's okay. There's a
Yeah.
solution to that. If you
Yeah.
already call your boss tonight, call them tomorrow and say, hey, could I get this morning block or this afternoon block off to go vote? And if the answer is no, go online, fill out the form to get your mail in ballot and do it that way. There's really no excuse. There's no excuse. And there's no widespread corruption surrounding mail in ballots. Anything you're hearing about that is fake news.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Always has been and always will be.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, please do everything you can to make sure you're in an appropriate position and help the elders in your community as well. Like I know for us, it's really important that my grandparents also are able to vote in a
Yeah.
safe and secure way. Make sure that everyone around you has what they need and that they're taken care of, so that their voices can also be heard.
Yes, it's so important. It is vitally important.
And what you said about this being a multi generational thing, I think one thing that we often forget about, people think, oh, it's just 4 years and then it's over. But you're absolutely right. Like right now, we're making a decision to appoint a woman into a seat that is a lifetime appointment. That will, I mean, and she's fairly young, that will be a multi generational decision if she gets seated.
And consequence. I mean, it will be a generational consequence for sure.
Yeah, and for those who may not be aware of what we're talking about, we're referring to, I believe she has a doctorate, Dr. Amy Barrett, the
Yeah.
current alleged proposed Supreme Court nominee to replace the late RBG,
Yeah.
which would, for a lot of us, be an incredibly devastating feat. And
Yeah.
it's, these are the decisions where presidents really matter, right?
Yeah.
Trump could
Yeah.
be in office for 4 years, but he's able to make appointments that can last 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
And so we
For
have to
sure.
be vigilant early and really, really be a part of the political process every step of the way. Because now we're in a position where I don't know her entire record, to be honest, but I know enough
Yeah.
to know that I'm terrified.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
And we saw with the Kavanaugh case that women do not necessarily support women's rights just because they are a woman.
which makes no. Can you tell me a little bit more about maybe like the psychology or sociology that plays into that dynamic, because I don't understand it.
I think some women of a certain age, I believe, in a certain tax bracket, feel like their loyalty is to patriarchy. And I think that they feel like the feminist movement is a fraud and that it takes away from family values and they do not support it. And even though many of these people in question um, have benefited from some of the rights that the feminist movement have fought for all women, they still don't believe in things that are opposing patriarchy. And patriarchy very much can be a mindset. There are certain ways of life that are built in patriarchy. Um, but I think that women who are loyal to patriarchy do not believe that all women should um, support one another, and they do not believe that no woman is free as long as there are women who are chained in any way in this world, whether they are U.S. citizens, refugees, women in other countries who are enslaved in some way. There's a school of thought that no woman is free until all women have freedoms. Women who I believe um, really cherish their stance, their politics, their money, their inheritance, their family name and legacy over things that would promote the good of most or all women. I do think it's a psychology, and I think that it is a flawed psychology. Honestly, no one really could have guessed that Kavanaugh would have been appointed and that a woman would have been the deciding vote after what came out. The courageous testimony by Christine sharing her story, her corroborated story, um, that she was assaulted by this man. And I feel like if you really think about loyalty, you will understand that we can be loyal to the wrong things. We can have faith in the wrong things. We can believe in systems that prosper on harming and oppressing and destroying populations.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I'm still struggling to understand it, to empathize with that in practice, but I understand what you're saying. I, I just, I don't know. It just seems as though sometimes there's almost an otherism that's developed within women that doesn't make any sense to me. And I'll point out what group it is. I'll just say it. It's um, upper middle class white suburban women,
Yes.
primarily in the Midwest. And I
Yes.
say that because those are the same women who polled that they were voting for Hillary, right? Polled everywhere that they were voting for Hillary, and then in the key battleground states didn't.
Yeah.
And now we are where we are today.
Yes.
And so you mentioned something that I wrote in my notes, and let's talk a little bit about family values.
Yeah.
This is a phrase that I have always hated my entire life, almost as much as I hate the phrase the American dream,
Yeah.
because I don't know what that means. And I don't think to me, it doesn't mean anything. But it
Mhm.
seems that for some people, it means something and it's important to them, particularly from people who identify with the party that I don't identify with.
Right.
So tell me more about family values and why that's such a political thing, particularly here in the United States.
Family values is misconstrued. I think that people in the Republican Party a lot of times feel like they're in that party because they believe that Republicans support family values and Christianity and wholesome values. They are pro-life and they are pro-family and they are pro um, everyone having, working, having a job, paying their taxes, being law abiding citizens. And on paper, that all looks good and sounds good. But there are as many Republican women of all ages who have had abortions as there are Democratic women or nonpartisan women. When we think about, or their children have had, you know what I mean? It's like we talk about what we stand for, what we support, but we have to actually live it. And I think that what's happening in Black and Brown communities has been happening, for years at this point. There's a real divide because we talk about Christianity, and we also think about there are white people who participated and benefited from slavery, and they were very much Christians, and they very much went to church every Sunday, and they very much felt like they had a right because of certain scriptures to engage in being slave owners and torturing their slaves. So people have a hard time getting around this concept of family values when so much horror and terror has been created in the name of God or in the name of religion. It's the same thing with oppression in this country. It's like people say they value family, but yet we don't have actual equal um, family leave acts for adoptions, for paternal leave, for paid maternity leave, but we value family values so much. So we say as a country, we say that we are pro life, but we actually mean that we're pro life after the delivery. We're not, bless you, we're not pro life when it comes to healthcare and affordable housing and quality schools for all children and providing equal livable wages so that people can feed and educate and house their families. That's not pro-life. Pro-life ends once a baby is delivered. So how pro-life are we actually? How can we be pro-life and have children in cages in Texas? How can we say that we're pro-life when we still have the death penalty? How can we say that we're pro-life when we are incarcerating Black and Brown men and women and children at epidemic type rates? When some of these men will spend decades in prison for things that they did not do, or for things that they did do that do not deserve the sentence that they have. So I feel like we say that we are pro life, but not when it comes to human rights issues. We say that we're pro family values, which I believe means, wholesome, um, loyal, dedicating ourselves and our time and our resources to things that matter and benefit all when they don't. Like you said, they benefit upper middle class families and ensure their ability to thrive when the rest of us spend generations just trying to survive and chase the idea of family values and the quote unquote American dream.
And also, those concepts seem to have such a homogenous viewpoint of what a family even is, which I
Yes.
think is my real root issue with the topic that seems to always be thrown around. Like, it's a man and a woman, and they're married, and they have kids, and maybe a
Yep.
dog, and it's great, and that's a family. But for
Right.
most of us, that's not what a family is,
Right.
particularly in Black and Brown communities. It's not my family. My family, it's my mother, who's the matriarch of my household and
Yeah.
always was. She made all the decisions in the household. My
Yeah.
father, my grandmother, who also is really important in our household, in a multi
Yeah.
generational household, as most
Yeah.
Black and Brown families do.
Yeah.
And it's just more diverse than that.
Yeah.
My godfather is a gay man married to his fantastic husband. That's a
Yeah.
family unit. And just none of these things seem to be included in the equation of family values in a
Right.
political context.
Yeah.
But those are families, and they're absolutely just as valid as any other Leave It to Beaver
Right.
depiction of family here, and these families just get left out of the equation, every single time.
You're so right. You're so right. And I hear you on so many levels because I feel like what was created 100 and some years ago, more actually, um,
Oh no, she's disappeared. She'll be back in a moment, everyone. I'm sure she's having just a quick technical difficulty. I feel like we should have like Jeopardy hold music while we wait for other people to come on. Are you back, Samara?
I think so. Like, oh, there I
Ah, there
am.
you are.
Hi, back.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
What were you saying?
I might have forgot. Oh, I feel like the family unit has evolved in so many ways, as has family values. I feel like it's something that could definitely be updated and evolved and so much more inclusive and so much more diverse, and would create buy-in from people across the country to want to um, be a part of family values. I feel like it is also segregated, like so many things are still in this country, because it does seem like this nuclear family when we have so many other models that are worthy and functioning and productive, and are helping move this country forward in so many beautiful ways.
Absolutely. I remember being in elementary school. I'll never forget this. And a teacher asked us to draw our bedroom. And at the time, we were living with my grandparents, and so I like drew like my grandparents' room and like a bunch of people. And they said, "No, we want to see your room." I'm like, well, this is my room. This is my home. These are my communities. And the teacher said, there's so many people there. Do you really live with, is it a big house? I'm like, no, it's a little apartment off its street.
Yep.
And it was just so confusing to my
Yeah.
teacher for some reason that one, I lived in a multi-generational household, and two, that I had to share space with other people.
Yeah.
And for me, this little, I didn't even realize I was broke at the time. Like, I didn't
Yeah.
think anything of it. That was just my
Yeah.
family, right? To
Yes.
me,
That
that
was your
was my family
experience.
unit, and it still is, and there's nothing wrong with it. And that was the first time someone had really kind of otherized
Yes.
my family experience, my family
Yeah.
unit,
Yeah.
where I started to question it. It was
Hmm.
very strange.
It is very strange. And I think it also shows how we can be one dimensional and how we can be offensive and not always even intentionally be. But when we think that life only happens through one or two lens, we can exclude other people who have unique experiences that we could learn from and that we could appreciate and support with just our empathy and our open mindedness.
Hmm. And well, speaking of educating people, could you imagine being a high school government teacher right now,
No.
especially after last night? Like, what are the conversations that are being had with children and
It's hard to
teens?
be, I was gonna say, it's hard to be a parent right now. When I went to, my daughter came home about 2 years ago, so she was about 7, and she was like, "Mom, you said that we shouldn't be bullies. We shouldn't be bullies. We shouldn't tolerate bullying." And I was like, "Yes, babe." And she's like, "But what happens when the president's a bully?" And I was like, "I don't know what to say." I'm like, "How do
How do
you
you
know
respond
about
to
this?
that?
How do you know about this?" She's like, "Well, people at school are saying that he's doing mean things to people at the border and he's logging them in cages, and that's not nice. He's being a bully." I'm like, I'm at a loss of words. And they had these books on Amazon about how to talk to your kids about the president being a bully. I was like, what in the world? Like, what kind of state are we in when we have to teach our kids to be kind, but the president of the free world does not have to be kind or affirming or inclusive, or respectful in any way to anyone?
I don't know. That's awful. I couldn't imagine. I really couldn't imagine. And just I feel every presidential debate is such an important part of history for so many reasons. And you can even just watching the debates over the past 50 or so years, you can really
Yeah,
see how politics has changed. And I
yeah,
just don't know what last night says about us. I left watching that, first of all, just feeling incredibly embarrassed
yes.
for us
As a
as a
country, we
community.
should be. Yes, yes, yeah.
Like,
We should be
how do we
embarrassed.
describe what happened? That wasn't political. There was no politics last night. It was people screaming over each other, and then a
It was a
moderator
shit
trying to
show.
get in
Excuse
the
my
middle
French.
and
Yeah,
separate it. It was so bad. So, I'd like to highlight a couple of things from last night, if you don't
sure,
mind.
sure.
Firstly, I'm really interested in talking about Proud Boys.
Yeah.
Can we? Can
Oh
we
boy.
Yeah. So for those of you who may not have, I'm sure everyone's heard at this point, but for those of you who may not be aware, the moderator asked President Trump if he would, right then and there, denounce communities such as white supremacists. And he named one other community, maybe fascists. Would you denounce those groups right here? And instead of saying, yes, I denounce those groups, they're terrible groups and they're terrorist organizations, um, the president instead says, and I'm going to pull it up because I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want to get it wrong.
Thank
He
you.
beats around the bush for a couple of seconds.
Right?
And then he says, why is it so much more difficult for me to find this right now?
No
Proud
worries.
Boys, stand back and stand down.
That's not answering the question.
It is answering the question. It's not the answer that you or I would feel safe with,
Yes.
right? That, in
Yes.
my mind, was a very strong answer. That was a very open answer to one. I'm not going to denounce these hate groups.
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to let them proceed to do whatever it is that they're going to do because they're voting for me.
Yes.
Whether he agrees with it or not, he's
Yes.
capitalizing on the fact that they're going to vote for him.
Yes.
And two, stand down and stand back isn't saying to stop.
And it's
That's a
aware and
temporary
it's
rule.
awareness that they are participating currently in some of the violence that's happening in this country. I feel like
Mhm.
you are saying, "Oh, I'm aware of what they're doing. I'm not going to say if I directly support it or not, but I'm not going to denounce it or try and stop it here publicly on this platform where I have the chance to bring some unity
As the president, as the
as the
standing
president."
president,
Yeah.
I'm going to choose division over unity because chaos gets me votes. And
And violence. Yeah.
I didn't know until our lovely Elle Hoffman, described to me today that the Proud Boys are a legitimate organization. I thought that was
Mm,
a phrase he was just using. I didn't realize, sorry, I just dropped my phone, that is
mm,
a real male only fraternal organization
mm,
that is incredibly right wing and has neo fascist tendencies and has
mm.
participated in violence in the
Wow.
past
I
in
thought they were a
American
group.
leadership.
I had no idea that they were a legitimate organization
It's
that
an
was,
entire org.
wow.
And as of today, of course, his team is trying to clean that up and is stating he doesn't know what that is. He doesn't know what Proud Boys are. But
How
that's a
can you
very specific.
even believe that? How, because either way, how can you believe that? If you don't know what it is and you're making that kind of statement, you're being naive. If you do know what it is and you're trying to minimize it, you're still being dangerous and you're still showing where your allegiance is to. Either way, it's bad. Either way, it's bad. And
Either
how would
way,
you comment on something like that, not knowing what it is?
It's insane to me. And so I mentioned this briefly in the very beginning, but this is a thread that runs through everything that happens in American politics with the Black community. And that's my question to you is, do you feel American?
That's something that I've struggled with, especially over this past year, because for a long time I did. I mean, my grandmother, I was raised in the South. My grandmother grew up in the South, and her parents were Jim Crow sharecroppers. And
Yeah.
her grandmother was a slave, and she had spent time with her. Um, and so my grandmother disliked the South very much, and she always encouraged us to move away from the South because of the racism and because of just the poverty and the poverty mindset, honestly, and some of the oppression that happened for Black and Brown people. And even though I realized racism was a thing, I was also taught to work hard and that things work out for you. And so I put myself through college and I put myself through graduate school, and I worked very hard to become. Um, quote unquote successful in this country. And in the past few years, I have had to think about how much harder I've had to work, how much harder we've had to work to ensure that our daughter goes to the best schools, which means that we have to live in white neighborhoods to put her in the best schools. And we just think about how much harder it is for Black and Brown people to have a quote unquote successful life, and how much is sacrificed, and how much harder we have to work than our white counterparts. And then for me, I think I've been naive in not knowing so much about history. And this year we've been really encouraged to learn much more than we were taught ever in school, in college, even. And so when you learn about things that happened with the Vietnam War, and the medical experiments on Black and Brown people, and when you look at soldiers who came back who had no rights and no freedoms in this country and did not get the proper benefits that they had worked for and many had died for. When you think about these things, when you think about what's happening even today in 2020 with Black and Brown kids, with their education, with their safety, and what's happening with police brutality, and you think you can no longer think that there's one America. There's not one America. That's for everybody. We have multiple Americas, but there is certainly a Black America and a white America. And, um, I think it's a challenge when you are faced to say, like, do I feel American? In some ways, I do. And in some ways, I feel like I have had um, an easier experience than some people who were raised in poverty and who did not have the opportunity to go to college for whatever reason. I think that there are different Americas within the Black community, but I think that we all can identify with the same, literally target that can be on our backs at any given moment if we were to come in contact with um, police or law enforcement. And so some days I feel more American than others, but I think that this year has opened my eyes in so many ways because there's so much more fear and there's so much more threat about our actual life and livelihood in a way that has been um, catapulted. I feel like there's exponential danger for people in this country that are Black and Brown since our current president has taken office.
Yeah. I struggle with this a lot too. So I am a Black American, but I'm also a Jamaican American.
Yes,
And so it's like the older I've gotten, the more I think aware I am of my own personal issues with safety and security in this country,
yes,
the more I find myself clinging to my Jamaican identity
yes,
more than my American identity. But
yes,
it's more so just of a security blanket,
yeah,
right? That I mean, I could go to Jamaica today and I'd feel pretty safe.
yeah,
I
yeah.
could go to a police officer in Jamaica and feel like whatever I needed help with would be addressed. And not to say that Jamaica's
Yes.
perfect, it's not. I understand
Yes. Yeah.
that. We have our issues, but as someone who was born and raised in on the state side,
Yeah.
it's very tough. It's very complicated, and I don't know where I'm going to stand on the issue, kind of long term. And we talked about this last time. I'm
Yes.
one of those people who's like, maybe I don't need to live here.
Yes.
Maybe it's time to consider moving to Europe. I've always been
Yeah.
a big fan of James Baldwin and Josephine
Yes.
Baker. And
Yes.
damn, it sounds pretty tempting of a
Yeah.
lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I struggle with it a lot, and I'm sure that I'm not the only person who struggles with
No.
it. And it all
Hmm.
ties into the politics of it, right? A big
Yeah.
part of why people in the Black community don't vote because they don't feel American. They don't feel a part of the experience in the equation. Same thing with taxes. Same thing with the census.
Yes.
It's all wrapped up in this one ugly bow
Yes.
of feeling otherized in the
Yeah.
place that you're supposed to call home.
Yeah. And not protected. I mean, I feel like I've learned so much about how much Black and brown people have not been protected in the same country that they do pay taxes and that they do fight for and defend against, and they do not feel like they're a part of the whole. And I can see how for some families it's been generational, um, just I feel like in some ways terrorism. There are people that you come in contact with that multiple generations of people have been incarcerated. There have been multiple murders for so many people in the Black community. And there was a Facebook meme that went around. A Black mother was protesting in 1955 against police brutality. Her son had been killed by a police officer. Um, he was arrested and he did not make it to the jail. I mean, he was murdered. And so I feel like we're in 2020 having the same exact conversation. And so I can definitely see how there are people who feel like they do not belong in the whole, that they are not a part of it, but yet they're being held to the same standards as if they were,
Or higher standards.
or higher.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I have a similar but different background to you. I was born stateside in Baltimore, Maryland. If anyone's seen The Wire, that was filmed in my neighborhood. So
Okay.
that's the best
Yep.
description that I could ever
Yep.
give to anyone of what my childhood was like.
Yep.
That's it, really.
That's real. Yep.
That's the life. I lost an older brother to gun
Hmm.
violence,
I'm
broad
sorry.
daylight.
Yeah.
And the game is a game that's often played in my family. It's
Yeah.
a means of income, unfortunately, for a lot of
Yes.
people.
For a lot of people.
And I, I grew up in a position where even when there were issues that we had, our local law enforcement didn't care.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh
Even
yeah.
if the people in my community were the victim of something that happened, it
Yeah.
wasn't addressed.
Yeah.
But let them stand outside of 7-Eleven too long, right? Solicitation, fine,
Yeah.
immediately.
Yes.
um,
Yes.
and so you just, at a very young age, you already don't feel like you're playing the same rules of the game. It seems like
Yeah.
everyone else has the cheat codes, about to get to the
Yes.
finish line, and you're still struggling to figure out
Yes.
if you're,
Yes.
game people is
How to
hard.
even log in. You're not even
Yeah,
sure
like,
how to
what's
even get
going on?
logged in.
I have a
Yes.
PS1 controller and you're playing on the PS4. What are we
Mhm.
doing? And
Mhm.
that's what it feels like. So I also had to work my butt off at a
Mhm.
super young age, got
Mhm.
into a really, really good school.
Mhm.
And even then, had to somehow navigate, okay, I'm in a school where I'm the only one of the only people who looks like me. I went to an Ivy League school, which as a black person is an entirely different episode
Yes. Yes.
of just tokenization.
Mhm.
Um, but I was on a campus where I'm working my butt off, also trying to not only do well in school, but pay for my school. And then I would even have cops on campus ask for me to show my ID.
Mm.
I'm like, well, what did I do? I'm walking to the library. What's going
Yeah.
on? You know?
That's
And it's
insane
just
to
like
me.
every step of the way, when you're one of the quote unquote good ones,
Yeah.
you're continually trying to be pulled back by
Mhm.
these systems that have nothing to do with your success. Like they have
Yes.
no interest in you succeeding. Those systems do
No.
not raise any more money. They don't get more funding. They don't get better equipment or whatever. No one's political motives are achieved or accomplished by you or I being successful.
Yes. Yes.
And so you're just fighting it every step of the way. And
Yes.
it's, every little thing like that. And then as a person in my career, working in venture capital,
Mm-hmm.
which is a field where less than 2% of all venture capitalists are Black women
Yes.
in the entire country.
Yes.
And so that comes with everything you would assume it comes with.
Yes.
And to this day, I have people who sometimes assume that I'm the secretary on the email chain
Yes.
for
Yes.
scheduling.
Yes.
Or that, oh, well, is someone else joining us? Is a more senior person joining us in this meeting? No, I am the senior
I
person.
am the senior person. Yeah.
Yes, I have a baby face, but like I I am a senior person and it is what it
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
And it's just like when I think about all of that all the time, I'm like, I don't feel like this was designed for me. And I know it wasn't.
Yes.
But
And
why
so
do I
many,
think I feel
yes.
this way?
Yes. So many of the posts that we're saying yes to everything that you said, and I hear and honor your experience. So many people are talking about the system's not broken. It was built this way, and it was built for Black and Brown people not to succeed, and that we can't necessarily change a system. We really have to create a new one that is inclusive, and that does promote the success of all people. And so it's hard to believe that. Um, but it's true that the system that we have was not built for all people to thrive if they put in their hard work and if they do, um, the right and the just things, that they will be okay. And that's so much of Obama's vision, this country, was that if you do the right things and if you work hard, that you would be able to get ahead. When that's not the case, and of course, we weren't going to change 400 years of oppression and dysfunction in 8 years. However, I feel like we've taken so many steps backward since the current president has been in office. And I think that it's so fitting that you said that we can spend generations trying to chase the American dream when other people spend generations building wealth and organizations and companies and legacies, and generational wealth. And I feel like we spend generations just trying to get to a point of stability in so many ways. And it talks about how much we are living a lie in this country. And I think that with any reckoning or with any rebirth, there has to be a falling apart. And I think that we're in that process now, and it can feel disheartening. And I think that it's really important that for each of us, that we value our own mental health, that we take measures to protect our mental and emotional and physical health, that we do what we feel we can in our sphere, but also know that we cannot compare ourselves to others and what they are doing. We have to do what we can do and also take care of ourselves, because this is a long game. Whether the current president gets reelected or not, we're still in a long game, and we have to continue to take local elections and presidential elections seriously and vote and become engaged in the process, and also realize that by giving up and avoiding political engagement, it's not solving the problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what I feel like we forgot to mention, but is also so important and so integral, is if you're really, really passionate about a certain issue in your community and just uplifting your people, you get involved.
Yeah.
You can run for so many things in your
Yeah.
community locally, whether it be your city council or other city advisory boards or something in your mayoral office or on a state level, an executive or legislative roles. There are so many ways for you to get involved locally in your community, even beyond voting, where you can really be a person who can enact change in office. I think a lot of us forget about that, especially in our community. I feel like political office isn't one of the sexy jobs for Black folk, right? What is
Yeah.
it? It's like, uh, you know, my mother used to always say rapper, basketball player,
Yep.
dancer, nurse. Those are
Yep.
your options.
Yep. Yep.
But let's really have the conversations about if you have the skills, which you probably do. Anyone who's a member of their community has the skills.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and you know your community, you know what your people need. get involved. You can be a part of the process.
Yes.
And sometimes they'll pay you to do it on top of everything
Yes.
you're already doing.
Exactly. And there are ways to get involved. And I think that's a really good point. Even for those who may not want to run for a position or an office, there are other ways to get involved. Like sometimes you can be really instrumental as a support person to the campaign, to the different initiatives in your communities. There's boards to be on. There are different ways to get involved and make a difference. And some are not as time consuming as you may think.
And even at the party level, even if you're more of a generalist and you're not
Yes.
super passionate about anything locally, you can go to your nationally registered party, whatever party that may be, and say, hey, I'm really good at spreadsheets. Put me to work.
Yeah.
And they'll do
Yes.
that. And they're always looking for more people to join the fight.
Yes.
Every organization is. We always need more people, more hands on board, make the dream work a little faster.
That's right. Teamwork makes the dream work.
Boom. Si se puede. I think that's a really good point to end tonight. I know we're a couple of minutes early, but I feel like that's what's going on in the world. That's what's important. Get out, do your census, register to vote. When the time comes, vote. Stay politically aware, stay
Yes.
informed. I hate to say it, but stay woke. Pay attention. I
Yes.
know there can be a lot of dissonance and it can get really irritating, especially the closer we get to the election. To
Yes.
continue to listen of what's going on.
Yes.
But
Be
it's really
aware.
important that we don't tune out.
Yes. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and realize that we can all do this one day at a time.
Absolutely. It's been lovely. Once again, I am Alexis Alston, and I'm here with.
Samira Williams.
And this has been another episode of To Be Black and Female, sponsored by Louvre Health Co., which is a comprehensive digital wellness platform brought to you by Elle Hoffman and Dylan. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Good night.
Thank you.